Afro House has exploded in popularity in the last couple of years, and in my opinion, it's only just getting started, as we're going to hear a lot more of it in pop music as it crosses over into the mainstream. Now, there are 5 steps to creating that Afro House sound, and today we're going to use all 5 of them to create this. Throughout the video, I've left little Easter eggs as to what these steps are, and I want you to let me know in the comments when you think I've uncovered one of them. Because the more engaged you are, the more you're going to understand every step of the process, and by the end of this video, they're all going to come together and you're going to be able to produce Afro House too. As usual, you can download this project file, all the samples and presets completely free below this video, so without further ado, let's hop into the door and get it done. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is set the tempo, which I'm going to set to 120 BPM, and we need to get a kick in there. That's the first part of any house music track, so we can use MIDI or audio to do this, and I'm going to go to some of my favorite kicks, and I'm going to choose this Black Coffee kick, and it's just something that's not so aggressive. It's kind of pretty understated, and it's got some real kick atmosphere in there, like an acoustic kick drum. So let's just have a quick listen to this. I'm going to have to make it quieter so we don't run into clipping on the master channel. So there's a nice vibe to it. Okay, on to the next thing on my magic list, which is the chords. A massive part of Afro House is taking influence from kind of jazz and soul. So we're going to get some really emotional chords in here. And I will start by making them with an organ. So I'm going to use Contact for this, but it doesn't matter. We could use a synth, we could use a piano. In fact, we're going to be using a piano shortly, but we're going to start off by using some organ sound on there. Basic jazz will do. That's nice. Okay, so we're going to create a chord progression. Easiest way to do that is choose which key you're going to work in. So any dance music track really will just use one key throughout. Of course, there are going to be exceptions to that rule, but in 99.9% of cases, you're going to stick to one key throughout the track. And the key is just a collection of notes that sound good together. So I'm going to choose the simplest of all the keys, which is A minor. And again, most of the tracks that you hear, EDM tracks, are going to be in a minor key. And if you're using Ableton, you can hit the scale button, and then it only shows the notes from within that key, which makes it super simple. Nice. So this is obviously based on the track Rapture by Black Coffee and Me and Kinda Music. So let's start by writing the bass notes. And if we change our grid to 1/8, I'm going to show you a really cool trick in a second for how you can keep that groove moving. So let's draw in the bass notes first. It's the easiest way to write chords, is draw in the bass notes first, and we can build the chords above them. So this is the trick I wanted to show you. We're actually going to start the second chord 1/8 before that beat, and that's going to drive that groove forward. So check out the effect it has. I'll probably get flagged for copyright actually, because this is the exact chords I think from that track. So now let's build up those chords above it. If you're in scale mode, you can just skip a note each time like this. And it's going to work. But I want to add more emotion to this, so I'm going to actually sustain perhaps that E, and I'm going to move it 1 octave below, and this is going to be a chord inversion. Let's move these up an octave though, it's a bit... let's move them back down. And then our progression will loop around again. So we're not using too many notes. It's a simple progression, but it's got some really nice feels to it. So I might move this up an octave actually. It's all a little bit low. That sounds better. Take it down a bit. And we're going to have more fun with the piano later. So this note here, this chord here, is a major. And then it sounds so nice when it goes back into that minor at that point. Okay, next thing on the magic list is a low percussion groove. So I'm going to just call that kick, keep it all organized, color it green, a natural color of kicks. And the percussion is a huge part of Afro House, obviously, and in fact any kind of dance music, because those drums are going to keep the rhythm, they're going to get people dancing. But we're going to use a low percussion that's going to be the main bass line almost of this track. And we want to keep things stripped back and really rhythmic. And instead of using an actual drum sound, I'm going to show you something I haven't really shown before, which is creating our own percussion sound. And it doesn't matter which synth you're using. I'm using Serum because I know a lot of you guys use it, but we're going to create a really tonal synth. And by tonal, I mean it hits a particular note. So, and we'll just use the root note of the track, which is A. But that obviously just sounds like a synth. So what we want to do is create a more low pitch, like a smoother pitch. We're just going to use sine wave, and we'll create kind of our own tom drum almost. So we need no sustain and a quick decay. If you think about when you hit a drum, the decay drops off really quickly. So we kind of got our own tom drum there, and I think that's probably how they made 808 toms on those classic drum machines. That's a bit subby. But I want to add a little bit. No, in fact, I think that's good enough. We can just kind of program in a nice rhythm that's going to play in between the kick each time. So we don't want this hitting at the same time as the kick, because that's going to fight with the kick. So what we want to do is just play on the 16th grid and create a sound or create a rhythm just on this one root note, which is going to dance in between the kick. Let's just turn off the organ for now. So it's as simple as that. So you can see none of these are hitting on the kick. So the kick hits there, 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 and there, and we're just dancing in between them to allow lots of space in our mix. Now I want to add a delay to this as well. And you might think, well, you don't want to have a delay on a low frequency, and that's kind of true, but we just want that kind of clickiness delayed in the top. So what we can do is add our delay. I'm going to add it on 16ths. And I'm going to make it ping pong. So this sounds dancing backwards and forwards. And all I'm going to do in this filter section is take out the low end. So it's just the high end click that's kind of delayed. So let's have a listen. So we can hear that click. I want to actually enhance that click a bit. So I'm going to put an EQ beforehand and just bump up these high frequencies. And that's going to sound really cool with our kick. Nice. Okay, on to the next thing, and that's adding a simple bass groove. So Afro House usually has really kind of stripped back minimalist bass that just adds to the groove rather than anything too overbearing like in other genres of dance music. So let's create our bass sound. I'm going to use Serum for this again, and when you download this project file, I will actually freeze these tracks, so if you don't have Serum, it's absolutely fine. But you can follow along in any synth, like this is simple synth work here. And we just want it hitting one note. Again, we're going to stick to the root note, and let's make a nice smooth rounded bass sound. So we'll make it mono because we don't want the bass notes kind of bleeding into each other. Let's just shape it in the way that we want. Take out those high frequencies. Probably add an envelope to the frequency so it closes down, like so. Take it down a couple of octaves. Just a simple saw pluck, really, like that, saw wave pluck. I'm going to add some more harmonics though, so I'll choose a different oscillator. Let's see, harmonic series. I'm just going to add a few harmonics over the top. I want to make sure this goes to that filter as well. So let's have a listen. So just adding some more width to that. Now let's make this a bit wider. So we're going to get some phase cancellation here, but if we add a sub oscillator, We can keep this mono, send it to direct out. So it's going to skip all these effects we're about to put on these two. So I'm going to add some hyperdimension to widen it out a bit more. Add some stereo width. So it's like a room reverb really. And I'm going to take out the low end so our low frequencies aren't going to have phase cancellation. So we can leave those sub frequencies being hit by our sub oscillator, which is missing this effect anyway. Cool, so that's our bass. And now we just want to use it sparingly to carry this groove forward. So we don't want to overdo it. Okay, so let's go to my bass. Why can I not see that? Ah, there we go. So we could use it once or we could use it twice. Again, just dancing on those 16ths. I'm going to loop that because that sounds pretty cool. So it's important it gets you moving and grooving just with the kick, the low percussion and the bass. I might increase the volume of this percussion. Nice. Okay, next thing we want to do is look at the other percussion and using, oh, we need to name this bad boy, don't we? What are we going to call this? I don't know, Afro House. Black Coffee is a big guy in Afro House. Let's call it Espresso Martini. No. Afro House Espresso Apartment. Man, that's probably one of the worst names I've come up with, but we're sticking with it. Okay, next thing we need to do is add, as I said, all of that African percussion. So you can find it from different places. I mean, you could even research which different African drums there are. But what I'm going to do is just go and use Contact for this, because I know there's a pack in there that has loads of these drums. So here we've got African shakers. Djembe, that's another African drum. So let's start off with the African shakers, because the shakers are going to be a really important part of this groove. Oh, those are interesting sounds. Oh, nice. So let's just add a little bit of an intro at the end of each 8 bars. Don't like that second one though. Maybe just that. Yeah, that's cool. So at the end of every few bars, that's what we're going to do. But we need some more interesting drums to this to actually carry on the groove. So I think I will just create a drum rack like so. And this is where we're going to get the shakers on the 16th notes, which are really going to carry this groove forward. So let's go drums. Okay, and we are just going to use a one-shot sample for this. Then we're going to layer it up with something that is going to add some extra spice to it. So we go to samples, drum hits, shakers. Okay, a shaker. Now with shakers, the most important thing to listen out for is the kind of frequencies that are being hit, or the timbre of the sound, because we can shape it afterwards in the simpler or whichever sampler you're using. So firstly, let's program it in on every 16th. Just copy and paste that, like so. So now we've got this effect just coming in quietly. So now what I want to do is tighten this up a bit. So I'm going to start transposing it, because I don't want it quite so prominent. And then I'm going to just shape it a little bit. Tighten it up. Maybe the fade out and the fade in. Very subtle, just kind of tightening this up a bit. And next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of movement to this. So I'm going to get a compressor. I'm going to add it just to this sound. Open up this little button here and hit sidechain. Then I'll take the input from my sidechain trigger. And all this is a short, sharp sample. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm using a rim shot as long as it's really short and has a fast transient. And then I've set it to sends only. So we'll never actually hear this, but it's programmed in on every beat, like the kick drum, you can see. And I'm using this instead of the kick drum because it gives us absolute control over the length of the bouncing effect that you'll hear in a second. So let's have a listen to this drum now. Let's just solo that so we can hear it. And now when I bring in this sidechain compression, I bring the threshold down. So we're just adding a little bit more movement to this drum. And it's all about the movement and groove. Okay, next thing we want to do is add that spicy extra loop that I just mentioned. So this is where I'd use something like Loop Cloud or Splice. So I'm just gonna search for a shaker loop that's on my hard drive already. Let's have a look, see what we've got. So we've got different shakers here. That's the thing, it's a bit, oh, that's cool, straight away. You know, that kind of sounds like someone's really playing that loop. And that's a really important part of Afro House, is to not have everything sound too, I guess, manufactured and perfectly in time. You need to get that groove going. And a way to do that is to use sample loops of people playing the drums, because then you're going to get that natural swing in there as well. And of course, sometimes you might have to tighten up some of the transients and make sure that it's in time with the rest of your track. But I mean, this sounds pretty good. So let's just bring it in and see if it sounds good. So it's just adding a little bit of human feeling to that. I like that. Cool. Now what I want to do though is just process this a little bit, and I'm going to take out the low end. I'm not doing much mixing at the moment, but we've got these low frequencies here which aren't needed. So first thing I'm going to do is take out some of them. So it's just the higher frequency. And then what I want to do is use this free plugin called Ozone Imager. And this is going to allow us to make this a lovely wide stereo, push it out in the stereo field, just to add more interest to our whole groove. So that's sounding pretty cool. And with the chords, nice. So what I'm going to do as well is create a room reverb on a dedicated auxiliary channel. Now an auxiliary channel is just somewhere where you can send multiple sounds and they all get processed through this channel in parallel. So I've created a short reverb with a decay time less than half a second long. I've just boosted up the volume a bit, and I've added an EQ taking out all the low end, because we don't want reverb in the low end because it can muddy up our mix. So what I'm going to do is just put 100% wet, so we're not doubling up any of the dry signal that's sent through. And now we can share that with a couple of things if we want. So we'll feed some of the shaker out there and listen to what happens. In fact, that's I don't think that having the beats algorithm is best. I'm going to choose Complex Pro. It should be a bit smoother. And now we can send some of this shaker out to that room reverb, which is just gonna make it sound a bit more vibrant. So that's off, it's a bit dry. Nice. Okay, next thing we have on my magic list is the Rhythmic synth. So another element of Afro House is obviously not just using African drums, but it's a combination of that with electronic instrumentation. So we want to have synths. We've already got that a little bit with our bass, but now we want a bit of a high-end rhythmic synth to kind of drive this groove along. And you'll note that it's kind of stripped back, and that's what we want to create the atmosphere and allow the mix to really shine. So let's call this Rhythmic synth. That's original. Nice one, Will. Top mark, son. So let's use a serum for this. And what I'm going to do is just create a sound from scratch that is going to help us drive this rhythm along. And I'll have it based on a saw wave, I think. So many sounds are. So the first thing I'll do is create the shape of this sound. Okay, that's kind of cool. I like it already. But what I'm going to do is tune some of these different oscillators to create a chord by hitting one note. So let's add some unison to this to detune it, just to add some more width. And I'll add a sub oscillator as well. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this sub oscillator as the root note of this sound. So they're all playing the same note, except the sub oscillator is one octave down, but that's fine. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to tune this up to the third, which gives it a minor feel. And this one, I'm going to put 7 semitones up, which takes it to the 5th position. So now hitting one note is playing a chord. Now to make this more interesting, I'm going to add an LFO to the pitch of both of these oscillators, these top oscillators, to make it kind of wiggle a bit, add some vibrato, and that's just going to add some more interest and depth to this sound. And now let's add on a filter, much like we did with the bass sound, and I'm going to just take out some of that high frequency with every hit. Not that much though, that's too much. Okay. So it's just sticking to that one note. There's too much wiggle there, I think. Now let's make this sound really kind of pop. Again, I'm going to use this hyper dimension, but we could actually just use this room reverb that we already created. So let's try that. It's going to add more width to it. In fact, I'm going to choose a different oscillator for this second one, just to add some more interest. So again, we'll go to the harmonic series. Just adds a little bit more interest. That's cool. Sweet. So now let's just jam along a rhythm on one note, and we can record. I'll do it on my keyboard because that's how I'm feeling today. So let's do it. So we're not creating too complex a rhythm, we're just getting something that works well and then repeating it, and that's all you need for a good groove. So I'm just going to tighten this up using quantize. So I'm just repeating that rhythm over and over to get that groove going. Nice. So that's the main groove of this track, and now what we want to do is create the piano. Like I said, we want to really kind of get this jazzy and take those jazz and soul influences, and there'll be more on that when we get to the vocals very shortly, so stick around for that. But let me know if you're enjoying this, finding it useful, guys. Give me a hell yeah or an amen brother if you are feeling holy, and we will get to those piano chords. So I'm just going to duplicate this and we'll go to the break before we add the extra depth. So at this point we're just going to create a piano. Now we can have that follow the main chords, or if you've got some piano skills, you can kind of jam along, and A minor is easy because you're only using the white notes. So as long as you stick to those, you're never going to hit the wrong note, and it's just kind of fun if you've got a keyboard to jam along. Now I'm going to use the Giant for this from Contact because I really like the sound. It's just got a nice tone to it. And I'm going to add my own reverb on another auxiliary channel, and this is going to be a hall reverb, so exactly the same process as room reverb, but we're going to make it a longer reverb, and then we can share that with a few things as well. Ho ho ho! Different progression, but that's nice. I mean, we could choose a different progression. I might actually. Yeah, I'm going to do my own progression. All right, away from the Rapture, now we're going to have, I think this is my own progression. It might be the same progression. Let's see. So let's draw in the bass notes first. And I'm just going to use the metronome to help me here. And And let's zoom in. And we don't want 16ths. 1/8 is all we need for this. That's too loud. Take down the velocity. So we're now going for our own progression, and that's fine. We're just taking inspiration from that track. But you can see we're building chords in exactly the same way. Using the bass note first, then building up the chord by skipping a note each time. Whoops, there we go. Yes, feels. And we can hold that chord whilst the bass note changes. So this is our chord progression. Oh, it's probably like Let Me Be Your Fantasy by Baby D. But it does show you that it's not so much the chords that you use, but it's the treatment of the process rather than using, you know, completely different progressions. Now we can see how it sounds with our current chords. I know I'll have to change them, it's fine. Because they're going to clash. So I'm just going to copy those there as well. We don't need the bass note, I don't think. Or we'll put it a couple of octaves up, so it's a different chord inversion, which is just a different order of the notes, but the same chords. So they're the same notes within each chord, but they're spread across various octaves. But because it's in the same key, all of this is going to work. That needs work, this synth. I'm going to go back to a saw wave for this. Mono, so they don't bleed into each other. Okay, that's sounding a bit more interesting. Nice. Okay, so let's take these chords back to the beginning before we get onto the arrangement and the vocals. Well, before we do that, let's jam something with this piano. So you can just jam if you are sticking all to the notes within the key, and if you record something in that's not quantized, that's going to give it more of that soulful feel. Anyway, so let's get back to that main groove, like so. And there's a couple of things I need to show you. First, Afro House is going to have movement throughout the whole track, so we're not just going to repeat the loop over and over again. Well, we are, but we're going to add automation to keep the interest alive. So let's just spread out this arrangement a little bit and duplicate this. Whoops, that's not happening in the right place. What's happening there on that loop? Okay, that note is out of time. That's not quantized, so we'll get rid of those ones and we'll just use this half that we quantized. Get rid of that, consolidate it, and now it's all going to be in time, so let's just duplicate that. Lovely jubbly. Now, to automate this, what we want to do is have a drone that's going to open up over time. I think this is another big indicator of an Afro House track, is that when they have an atmosphere or a drone that's just going to stay throughout the whole track and open up over time, and it's just going to add this really nice sustained, suspended kind of tension throughout the whole track. So let's add another serum. And I'm just going to hit the 2 notes. So we'll hit the root note in the 5th again, like many of these sounds. So that's the A and the E, which is the 5th relationship, like a power chord. Now all we want to do is tone this down a bit. So we'll put a filter on there, and this is going to be a sustained chord. And we're going to use an LFO to add movement, but we'll use another oscillator. And again, much like with the bass, we're going to try and find another waveform that's going to add some more interest. Harmonics. That's cool. So now let's add some movement with an LFO. I'm going to add that to the D tune and just tone it down a bit. So it's just adding a little bit of movement over time. We can add that same thing to the pitch. So it's just over time, gently. You know, we could add another LFO at a different rate to the filter, but just gently again. So the filter's always moving just a little bit. And it can open up throughout the whole track. So let's just take out some of the low frequencies, so it doesn't fight with our bass too much. And then this is going to open up and play throughout the whole track. So you could start like this. And by the end of the track, that atmosphere could open up like that. Now I'm going to push it back in the mix as well. I'm going to add a little bit of reverb directly to it, and that's going to push back this sound in the mix. Soften it down a bit. Way more atmospheric. Just throughout the whole track. Now let's bring the chords in. Whoops, missed the key. And same with the rhythmic synth. Just over time you can open up the filter on that. Let's keep that going. And then bring the piano in. There. Now let's bring that filter on the synth down. Nice! I can't keep holding that sustain. Whoops, what am I doing? Okay, next thing we want to do is get the vocals. Now, as I said earlier, Afro House uses a lot of jazz and soul influences. So it's a combination of the African rhythms, like complex polyrhythms using African drum sounds, combined with jazzy chords and sometimes soulful vocals as well. So let's try and find some vocals that are going to work on this track. And for that, I'm just going to loop the break and then go to splice to try and find some vocals. So we're going to choose the key, which is A minor natural, lovely. And for genres, I'm going to choose neo soul, and let's just listen to some of them, see how they sound. Oh, it's a bit loud. Didn't like it anyway. That's cool.
I want to get to know you just a little bit better.
That's sexy as hell. Oh, that's lovely. Let's take that. Ideally, you'd have more vocals, but let's just take that hook, and you might use it just once or twice in the whole track. So it's 155 BPM, because it tells us there. I think that's too fast, so we're going to have to make sure that we warp it correctly, and then hit Complex Pro, and that's going to slow down this whole vocal. Let's turn it down in volume. And we're going to add lots of reverb. That's a bit weird when that happens. Do 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 do. And that's pretty much it, guys. I'm going to work on this arrangement a bit more so it sounds better before you download it, which you can do for free using the link below. But I want to know, did you guess what those 5 secrets to Afro House were? Well, let's summarize them. 1. It often uses interesting polyrhythms using African drums such as djembes, batar, and congas. That's a huge part of that Afro House sound. 2. They use a simple stripped back bass groove that doesn't dominate the drums, it just enhances the rhythm. 3. There are big jazz and soul influences, especially when it comes to the chords. 4. It often uses atmospheric drones that just sustain through a track, creating movement and interest whilst allowing that stripped back feeling to continue. And it avoids the arrangement getting boring because these drones and atmospheres are always modulating and moving slightly using automation and LFOs. And 5. Afro House often, but not always, has soulful female vocals that complement and enhance those jazzy chords. Now, if you did enjoy this video, I know you're going to enjoy this one here, where I reveal some of Black Coffee's composition techniques. And the track that's playing now is what we cover in this video. If you want to get your music to a professional level in any genre of electronic dance music, don't forget to check out the Accelerator program below, which has helped our students accumulate over 100 million streams. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you over at that next video.